Hello, welcome to my bookshelf, and today I'll be giving you my spoiler-free review of Hater by David Moody. And as you can tell from the cover, this is a very violent story. Like, if this was a movie, it would be rated R. So, as far as the synopsis goes, basically, society has become very violent. And it's extra scary because these things seem to happen without any kind of warning or trigger. So what I mean is, certain people, and as far as I can tell, they're completely random. They just, all of a sudden, something will come over them and they'll just start becoming so violent to the point that they will kill anyone who's around them. And obviously that's horrifying, and they don't care who's around them. Like, that could be your husband, your wife, your children, your best friend, doesn't matter. Like, you become almost a different person in a sense, and become very, very violent. So yeah, this has been happening all over the place, kind of completely randomly. And it just becomes like more and more people are like changing into these haters, as the book calls them. And it's become this almost like end of the world-esque kind of dread and fear happening. So it's very scary in that sense. Like, if this was actually happening, that would be like horrifying, because you can't trust anyone. Like, there's literally no sign of, who is going to change and who isn't. So it's completely just terrifying. And that's kind of like the world that this book is describing. And this is all very suddenly happening, and it's scary. So yeah, it's a very violent book. Like, the book describes in detail how these people are killing other people. So it's very gruesome, very gruesome. So just kind of a warning as far as that. Like, I think it has an interesting premise, but yeah, they definitely go explicit as far as that goes. So let's just jump into my ratings now. So the first category is writing. I was kind of on the fence about what to rate this, but I decided to give it 4 stars. I was originally thinking like 3 stars because ultimately it is very simply written. It's pretty straightforward. It's kind of repetitive in parts, in the sense that each chapter, at least for the first good half of this book, it'll start with a like little vignette. And it'll just show you some random person we don't know, we've never seen before. They'll be changing into a hater. And we get to see them right before it happens, and we get to see them during the change, and then we get to see them try to murder someone. And this happens over and over again for quite a few chapters, and I think that, like, after a while, it's like we get it, and I don't think that we get any new information from it. It's almost just kind of there for the gore factor, I guess? I don't really know, but to me, I didn't find it that interesting after the first, like, 2 or 3. I was like, okay, the same pattern is happening over and over again. I think I got it. Like, I'm cool. But anyway, it's not bad in that sense, but it is kind of repetitive, which I think kind of, I don't know, it's kind of disappointing. And another thing with the writing is that this is the first book in a trilogy, which I didn't know going in, so it's kind of my fault, but you can tell, like, I feel like halfway through, it kind of dawned on me that, like, maybe this is a series, because it's just kind of building up to, like, the actual big events. You know what I mean? It's because it is the first book in a trilogy, it has to do certain things, and I think it does those things decently well, but it's almost kind of dragged out a little bit more than I think it needs to in some parts, and then, I don't know. I don't think the writing is horrible, which is why I gave it 4 stars. I just think that there were some parts I had problems with, which is why I took a star off. But I will say something that also I think shows that the writing is good, is that we get this sense of dread and fear from our characters. Like, it feels really potent. Like, when you're reading it, you get that sense of despair as if this was actually happening, which I think is something that a lot of authors would strive for, is to have like a specific tone be felt by the reader. And that was definitely the case for this book, so it did a really good job as far as that goes. And it felt very cinematic, I think, because of that too. Like, I could imagine everything that was happening, which I sometimes have a problem with that. Like, sometimes, like, with descriptions, I just get so confused. My mind's eye cannot like come up with a picture of what's actually happening. But I thought that this book did a great job of describing what was happening, and you could kind of see what was happening. And I think that also added to the scariness of the situation. So yeah, the writing was good. It could have been a little better, I think, at parts, but I don't think it was like horrible by any means. And I think it did a lot of interesting things, and it kind of delved into some interesting territories. But I just think that it didn't completely do anything amazing in that aspect. Like, it could have done so much more, but it kind of held back. And I don't know if that's just because of the writing or because it is like the first book in a trilogy. It's hard to say. So I enjoyed the writing, but yeah, could have been better at parts. All right, so the next category is characters. So this is kind of where it falls short for me a bit, especially in the writing. I think that the writing could have been so much better, like in this area, but it just wasn't. And like I said, I don't know if that's just because it's the first book in a trilogy and all of that. I'm not really sure, but I would imagine though that you would want the characters to be really well developed, especially in the first book. So like we want to continue reading, we want to know what happens to our characters. So I don't really know what's up with that, but yeah, I just felt like the characters, they did what they needed to do, so they were effective in that sense, which is why they get kind of like an average rating, but they couldn't get extra stars from me because I felt like they didn't have that much depth. Our main character, obviously, who's like the narrator of the story, like obviously we get a decent amount of depth from him, but at the same time, I felt like there was still so much about the main character that I didn't know, that I would have liked to have known. I just felt like, I mean, he was definitely the most developed, but I felt like even him, I didn't really get that many nuances from him. He also seemed a bit stereotypical, and he just kind of did what the plot needed him to do. So I was kind of disappointed by the characters, especially the side characters. They were pretty one note, which is disappointing. To me personally, I'm a huge character person. And so I was disappointed that the characters were not that well drawn, like developed in this book, but I do think that the premise was really interesting, so that kept me engaged throughout it, but I was disappointed that I didn't have that connection to the characters that I normally do. That was disappointing for me. And then, naturally following, enjoyability for me was a 3-star. A lot of what I've already said before is kind of why that rating is lower. The characters, just, they weren't there for me. And the writing, it had some issues. I don't think this was a bad book. I just felt like it had so much potential and it didn't quite live up to it to me. But yeah, it's an interesting premise, and I am genuinely curious to see what happens next in this trilogy. But at the same time, I'm going to be honest and say I'm not going to go out of my way to seek out the next book. I'm just not. But, if I come across it, sure, I'll read it. I have nothing really against the book that way, but I'm not gonna search out for it. I don't think this is a book I would reread. This might be a book that I would give to someone just because it wasn't really the book for me per se, but I think that I know people who would really enjoy this kind of thing. So I think that it just depends on what kind of reader you are, and that's the amazing thing about books, is that they are so diverse and so different. And so even though I may not have liked it that much, I think I know people who would really enjoy this. It just depends what you're looking for. But if you do like this kind of thing, where it really is more just kind of about the action and the violence and this situation that's happening, then yeah, I think this is the book for you. But to me, I just, in general, I'm not a huge fan of fighting and watching those scenes or anything like that. I don't have anything against it, I just kind of get bored. I will say that these were at least engaging. I wasn't necessarily bored by the violence in here, but it still didn't make the book that much better for me. But at least the fight scenes were creative, which I think can be difficult to do, especially since there's just been so much out there. But I think that these were at least interesting to read if you're into that kind of thing. And so yeah, as a recommendation, I wouldn't necessarily not recommend this book, but I think I would just kind of warn you that it's not an amazing book. If it sounds at all interesting to you and you're okay with reading about lots of violence, then go for it. You might enjoy it. Alright, so that is my review for Hater by David Moody, and I should probably just clarify and say that, like, overall, my star rating is like 3 stars. I don't think I said that before, but yes, I gave this book overall 3 out of 5 stars. Pretty average to me. I liked it, but it didn't do anything amazing to me. But yeah, like I said, it was enjoyable, but it could have been better. And with that, I just want to say that I would love to hear what you have to say about this book. I had never heard about this book before, so if you have heard about it or if you have read it, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, I just want to thank you guys for watching this video, and until next time.